Possible fight of the night contender in the main card at UFC 290 this weekend. While Jalin Turner, the Tarantula's 5-fight finish streak, may be over due to the constant wrestling attack of Poland's Mateusz Gamrot, Turner gets another opportunity at top flight competition when he takes on City Kickboxing's own the Hangman, Dan Hooker. And if you look at a fight like this, I mean, Jalin Turner is one of those guys, comes in on Contender Series, gets the fight against Vicente Luque at welterweight, does not win that fight, but Turner's really been able to show just a diverse skill set. And he's one of those interesting cases of a young guy without really the greatest level of experience getting the opportunity to train at Ruka Sport down. It's an invite-only gym in Southern California. He's got that great boxing, really good power, really, really good submissions once it does get down to the mat. But the biggest thing that Turner has struggled with, and I talked about it earlier, the Mateusz Gamrot fight and then the fight that he had against Matt Frevola. He did struggle against the takedowns. Now, both those guys are ranked in the top 15 at this very moment, so it's no shame there. But for Jalin Turner, when you're breaking down a fight where Turner's taking on a fellow striker, those kicks from the outside, the uppercuts, the body shots when it gets in close, Jalin Turner will meet you with a knee up the middle as a big guy, and it's going to hurt. And these two guys, I don't know how Dan Hooker used to make featherweight. I don't know how he tried to make it against Arnold Allen. But these are some of the bigger lightweights you're going to find in this division.
Oh, they definitely are. And I think the range is going to be important. But I'll just throw my wrench in right now. Dan Hooker likes to wrestle when he's getting outstruck on the feet, and I oddly think that's going to be a really important part of this fight because Jalin Turner can get held down when he's not able to threaten with some of those submissions on that first touch because that's where he succeeds, and goodness, I made up a word. He succeeds because when you go for those takedowns and you do leave your neck in a poor position, how many times have we seen Jalin Turner's elbows immediately come up and we know that guillotine is cinched in? He has those defensive submissions in that back pocket, but Dan Hooker, and we saw it in the Nasrat Haqparast fight, we saw it in the Dustin Poirier fight and in the Paul Felder fight too, as those went late. 5-round fights, so a little bit different. But when Dan Hooker is starting to feel uncomfortable on the feet, which doesn't happen often, right? Like, Dan Hooker is an elite striker. He is pretty good defensively when he's not fighting guys who throw big power hooks around the side. But that's why I'm just going to kind of speak out loud here. That's why I have a hard time with this fight. Jalin Turner does the things well that should beat a guy like Dan Hooker at this stage of his career. He throws great power shots down the middle that should be able to hit him. But oddly enough, Dan Hooker gets hit more by hooks, I would say, than anything. We saw that not only in the Arnold Allen fight, go all the way back to when he was in featherweight before he moved up. All of his fights, a lot of the hooks when he is keeping his guard high can get around, which Jalin Turner is more straight shots, and Dan Hooker can become, I'm not saying he's a great wrestler, I'm not saying he's Khabib, but he will become a wrestler later on in fights, and I'll be curious to see if he will use that to try to win out on some moments, because if he does get hurt by a guy like Turner, maybe we could see Turner cinch up a submission after that, but Hooker's the guy we have seen go for those takedowns when he feels uncomfortable.
Hooker's tricky because the fight against Nasrat Haqparast, they threw it together on short notice, they had to go across the world, both of them, to take the fight. Haqparast's mother just passed away before the fight, but to his credit, Dan Hooker did look really good with the takedowns that he was able to get in that one. He had the good takedowns against Dustin Poirier. He had one against Paul Felder, as you had mentioned. It was kind of a hallmark of something that he struggled against. In his fight against Yair Rodriguez, there was a 30-26 out there, a couple of 30-26s in that one. But one of the guys fighting for the title, and Dan Hooker's fighting Jalin Turner. So if you do look at it for Hooker, his best year, probably 2018. First round finishes of Gilbert Burns and Jim Miller. That stuff doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
He had one of those really significant rises, though, and you can't say that about a lot of fighters. When Dan Hooker really was on his rise in the lightweight division, after he had his problems at 145 before he started to run into the Michael Chandlers of the world, the Dustin Poiriers of the world, like, Dan Hooker was on a significant rise to where every fight night card, he would be the main event, he would fight a guy who was further up in the rankings, and it really did feel like they were building towards something with Dan Hooker for a long time.
Random card that I just grabbed. I'm going to play the trump card. It's a rookie card of Cody Hoyer. Trump card right here. Jalin Turner training for this one at Ruka Sport 5 weeks ago on his Instagram. Flew over to Dubai to work everything with a thick boy, Khamzat Chimaev, getting ready for this one. So interesting stuff there for Jalin Turner in the matchup. He's a big favorite coming off of that loss to Mateusz Gamrot. If you consider the scorecards in that one, they were kind of all over the place. But on MMA decisions, he had 7 30-27s Gamrot, 16 29-28s Gamrot, 3 29-28 Turners.
And he landed some good shots.
Turner had the weird knockdown in the first round that looked like a slip on Gamrot, and Gamrot won the first round, and Gamrot was able to, I thought, win convincingly 2 of the 3 rounds. But if you look at it for Turner, I mean, the strikes are on point. We have a look at the Tapology votes. Surprised to us as they are to you. I'm going to say over under 72.5% Turner here.
I think they'll be under.
I think they're going to be under. They're over. So 1,195 total votes, 81% Turner, 62% by knockout. For the 19% that have Hooker, you've got 51% by decision, 35% by knockout. And Hooker in his last fight, he took on Claudio Poyes, who was all about that scoot, about that butt scoot. And if you look at it for him, like Poyes kept trying to fish for the legs.
Those front kicks were gross.
He was trying Imanari rolls. He almost tried the Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje. I'm going to slide down here for this little base slide kick.
Throw sand, Tony. Throw sand.
Didn't work. But for Dan Hooker, yeah, the old teep to the breadbasket, that was the end against Poyes. But if you look back at Dan Hooker's last win, we talked about it a lot. The Nasrat Hakparas win where he went out and wrestled. The losses of late, Chandler... That earned Chandler a title shot. He eats the overhand shot.
Him and Poirier arguably had fight of the year.
The loss to Islam Makhachev where he gets taken down and submitted quickly. And then the loss to Arnold Allen where he also gets finished and he gets outstruck, but he depleted himself to 145. Dan Hooker's durability, questionable. I don't know how he lived through most of that Edson Barboza fight, but he did. That was his prize for beating Jim Miller and Gilbert Burns. Here's Edson Barboza. Have fun with that puzzle. But for me, I do... like Jalin Turner in the matchup. Obviously, I don't like the wrestling, but I think those power shots are going to win out. His knees up the middle, like I said, and his kicks are pretty darn good.
Dan Hooker, and this isn't a perfect comp, but Dan Hooker mindset-wise is a little bit like Jimmy Butler, right? Like, he might not be the best of the best. He might not represent the elite, but he is going to give it everything he's got, like you said in the Edson fight. Like, he even got Edson on the ground, completed a takedown, and was having some success after he'd eaten a ton of bad shots. Now, Edson got back up to the feet. He landed a lot more body kicks. You guys all know the story. But Dan Hooker's not going to beat himself, and I do think that has to be said. But I think this is another one, and we could say this 5 or 6 times on this card. I think it's going to be a really, really close fight and a very competitive fight. I think I favor Jalin Turner, but I think he's going to eat some big shots from Hooker. Hooker's not a guy who's just going to get hit once and fall down.
Both of us going with the Tarantula, Jalin Turner to get the win, bring it back to California. Some big-time fights left on this card, including the next one. Robert Whittaker's taking on Dricus Duplessis. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.